Another day, another batch of classified documents found at the president's home in Wilmington, Delaware. The White House reportedly requested the FBI search his home, and after 13 hours of looking around Biden's house on Friday, probably including the garage with that Corvette on Friday, they came up with a fourth batch. Strange. More than a week ago, remember this? The White House saying that the search for documents was complete.
So we should assume that it's been completed?
You should assume that it's been completed, yes.
Well, not exactly completed, because there were more. Well, once again, we don't know a lot about the amount of classified information, let alone what the information contained, in a seemingly carefully crafted statement. Biden's personal attorney said, quote, the DOJ took possession of materials, including 6 items consisting of documents with classification markings and surrounding materials. And the special assistant to the president won't say just how many classified documents in total were found across all 3 locations.
It's a good question, and actually the answer to it is a little bit complicated. We want to be very, very careful to be respectful of the integrity of that investigation.
Meanwhile, integrity, that's a funny word to use. Democrats continue to say nothing to see here. Biden doesn't know anything.
The important point there, Martha, is that he had no idea. I do think this was inadvertent.
How is this inadvertent, Andy? I mean, basically, yesterday you were talking about how, first of all, his lawyers from the very beginning have said that they have been cooperating, that they, in fact, were the ones that offered up this information. You called that out as being a lie number 1. And now, inadvertent, that is not the case here. Now we've got 4 different incidences of finding classified documents, and the president knows nothing about it.
Yeah, well, first of all, even if it were inadvertent, which, as you point out, the evidence doesn't seem to stack up that way. But even if it were true, the violation is gross negligence with classified information. Inadvertence is not a defense. So it's almost a plea of guilty for them to be saying that. And this business about how they self-reported, just to be clear on this.
Yeah, go over that.
They did not self-report. So the Biden private lawyers find the first batch on November 2nd at the office, right? They notify not law enforcement, they notify the Biden White House, which notifies not law enforcement, but the National Archives. Now, and this other step is important too. They were hoping, I think, that the National Archives would just tuck this away. Who notified the Justice Department? It wasn't the top political officials at the National Archives. It was the Inspector General, whose job is to look for misconduct in the agency and report it to Congress. So it was the Inspector General of NARA that reported it to the Justice Department. And then the Justice Department sat on it until after Election Day. And it's one thing to say, well, that's consistent with their practices. They try not to do anything too high profile that could influence an election. But that didn't mean they couldn't quietly have the FBI do searches. And no Justice Department restriction stops the White House from making anything public.
Yeah.
But I don't think they ever intended to make this public.
And this is something I talked about yesterday, Katie, because you talk about the fact that, first of all, his lawyers were not forthright, and they sat on this. And again, the midterm elections were conveniently right before this information was released to the public. That was obviously intentional. So now, how do they cover this up? There is no cover up. Now it's a matter of who's going to subpoena the president at some point and get him to start talking.
Well, they claim that the first batch of documents was found on November 2nd, a week before the midterm elections. We are now almost 3 months past the midterm elections. This is the first time we've heard of the FBI actually getting involved in doing these searches rather than the White House counsel or President Biden's personal lawyers. That seems like a stretch when it comes to the ability to do your own investigation, so to speak. But the fact is that Joe Biden, at the time that he had this information, was in illegal possession of these classified documents. We learned yesterday that the new information is from his time in the Senate. And I think when we're in a time when we talk about double standards, not just for political appointees or for politically elected leaders like Joe Biden or even President Donald Trump, but for staffers. I have a lot of friends who work in Capitol Hill who have security clearances, who work in Senate SCIFs. If they were ever found with any of this information in their apartment or taken out of the SCIF, they would be prosecuted for it. So I think the question moving forward is, we know that the argument from President Biden, from the White House counsel, from his lawyers saying 6 items items, which could be a box, could be one item, it could be, it's not just 6 documents, right? Very carefully wording there. What's going to happen in terms of will there be charges? The House Republicans are certainly going to look into this. They don't have the ability to charge anybody. They simply can refer something to the Department of Justice. But President Biden saying that he wasn't aware that these things were there, the argument from the White House that, you know, he takes classified information seriously continues to fall apart by the day as we get more information about the types of classified information that was in his possession in multiple locations.
Let's listen to Democrat Senator Dick Durbin when he was confronted about classified documents and the double standard here, because he's comparing it, of course, to the former President Trump. Watch.
It's an outrage. It is a literal outrage.
Is it also an outrage for the current president?
What happened and followed from it is significantly different.
How is it different? Classified documents are classified documents, Joey. Why is it that there is a cover-up now and a backpedaling? I mean, and nobody's even talking about the timing in all of this. You know, people love to slam Trump for accusing Democrats of stealing the election. Well, let's talk about the midterm elections, because that didn't seem like a fair election had this information been released prior to.
You know, I get the privilege of sitting here for this platform and speaking to people with, you know, actual real-world experience and that have covered stories like this. And it's easy for me to hone in on the politics and even the legality of, can the president be indicted while he's in office? Is there an opportunity to set a precedent here for, should the president of the United States be held to the same policy that a lieutenant in the Navy is held to down in the EOD school? And those are important issues for sure. And I think about what's important to people sitting at home. You know, are they surprised by this at all? No, they're not. They don't expect much out of politicians, I don't think. They expect politicians to, where they can, play by rules that only belong to the elite. So I don't think people are surprised by it. I think a lot of people at home want to know, what were those documents? And what does this mean in the big scheme? You know, does this open the door for Republicans to go investigate and link the Hunter Biden investigation? Does this open more opportunity for investigation? Do they get more eyes on if some of those documents are pertaining to a certain thing? I think people at home want to know, in the grand scheme, more why he had them and what he was doing with them and why he had them for so long.
Could I just say one thing about that? Because we've talked a lot about the classified documents. The other thing we heard last night is they also took notes.
Yeah.
So I'm sure people are curious, like, why are they taking notes if they're not more classified? If you go into a classified briefing, you are not allowed to take notes and take them out. So just because your notes aren't stamped like top secret SCI, you don't get to take stuff out of the skiff and go. So I assume that when they said they took notes, that's what they're talking about, that he actually, besides being cavalier with the actual documents, he took notes he wasn't supposed to take.
I think that's really important. What you're saying is not only was there classified information, meaning what was written down is considered classified, there are evidently also documents that were labeled classified. So in one, it's almost egregious, and in the other, that's why you need an independent investigation to go in there and look, because there could be things transcribed that are still classified in nature but aren't labeled because they were transcribed onto a Word document.
But shouldn't someone like Joe Biden, who spent 40 years in Washington, who was supposed to be the guy who knew all the rules, right? He prided himself on understanding the way Washington works, and yet he was hoarding classified documents from his time in the Senate and as vice president. And to answer Senator Durbin's question about why this is not the same thing, it's not the same thing. We haven't seen photos of the information sprawled out from the FBI leaks that we've seen to the media. And also, you know, President Trump, there may have been problems with the classified information that he had, but he was the president, and he was capable of declassifying certain information. Joe Biden, as vice president, did not have the same capabilities to do so. So in terms of the standard here, there's certainly a double standard. But again, I think it comes down to people wanting to know exactly why these documents were used, why he had them for so long, and why people like Hunter Biden, who has a criminal record of engaging in very egregious and shady behavior, had easy access to these documents if he wanted it.
Absolutely. And there was no visitor log at the house either. So God only knows who went in and out of that house and who had access to these records. And it's amazing because it actually took them 12 hours to find these 6 pieces. They were in that house for 12 hours searching. Wow. This is after the White House said the search is over. It has been completed.
Yeah, but do you remember when they came out of Trump's place, I think they said they had like 19 boxes, if I'm remembering
Yes.
that right. And then the next thing we heard, it was over 100 documents. So as you pointed out, we don't know what item means.
Exactly.
It could mean anything.
We don't know. Republicans are calling Biden a serial classified document hoarder. I would love to play that tape real quick.
I took the president at his word when the first set of documents were found that he had just inadvertently misplaced those documents. But now this has gone from just simply being irresponsible to downright scary.
Clearly, he's become a serial classified document hoarder.
I guess that's one way to put it. But of course, we're going to have to wait and see if we actually get information as to what these classified documents are, what actually is in them. We wait to hear that.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.